Is anybody else sick and tired of hearing about pregnant Joker? If you hadn't heard of it, congratulations. You've managed to avoid a bizarre and irritating part of social media, or perhaps social media in general, which is what we all should do, but then where would we be without our vices? Today we're talking about the fact that the Joker from DC Comics isn't pregnant. That's right, he is not. I know that the thumbnail and even the first sentence of this video may lead you to believe otherwise, but just like the comic I'm going to be talking about, if you take an extra few minutes to figure out the context, you'll be a lot better off. The comic in question is issue 4 of The Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing. The pregnant Joker thing takes place in the backup feature, Knocked Upside Down. That's right, it's not even the main story, even though it's made headlines. Though I will circle back to the main story towards the end of this video. Both the main story and the backup are written by Matthew Rosenberg, but the artists are different. The artist for the backup is Francisco Francavilla, and I'm going to describe the story to you page by page so that you can see exactly what happens. So page 1, the Joker faces the hero Zatanna, and he, as well as his 2 henchmen, Gaggy the Clown and Jackanapes, have been caught trying to steal water from Gotham, although to me it looks more like mud. Joker is also trying to flirt with Zatanna, telling her that they should get married and start a family. She shoves his face into the mud and casts a couple of her backward spells on him, one of which says, "No one else will ever have your baby." The spell isn't relevant to what happens, even though the Joker believes it is. After Zatanna leaves, the Joker mentions that he swallowed a lot of mud. That part is relevant. Page 2, the Joker wakes up the next day, his stomach is distended, making him look pregnant, and this is the panel that everyone has been referencing, where Gaggy says, "I think you're pregnant." Page 3, they get an OBGYN, or rather, a random supervillain doctor named Dr. Phosphorus, who the Joker keeps mistaking for other characters. Dr. Phosphorus remarks that he doesn't even know where the baby could come out of, and then the Joker vomits up a bunch of mud. Page 4, Joker asks, "Is that mud?" It seems to be some type of mud creature, perhaps similar to Clayface. Dr. Phosphorus says, "You weren't pregnant after all." Then the Joker asks everyone to kill the mud creature. Page 5, Jackanapes accidentally shoots Dr. Phosphorus and Gaggy without getting the mud creature. Page 6, Joker and Jackanapes catch the creature and it turns into a little doppelganger of the Joker. And then the final page, the Joker reveals his quote-unquote son to Zatanna. And that's it. That wasn't so offensive, was it? So why has this story stirred up so much shit? Why are there so many tweets and YouTube videos that say things like, "Joker pregnant, DC gone full woke. This proves DC is ending. DC turns Joker trans." You see, it's not the outrage itself that bugs me, it's the disingenuous nature of it all. Joker isn't pregnant, and yet sites are writing their headlines as if he is, possibly just as clickbait. Though in some cases it's obvious that they didn't actually read the story beyond maybe 1 or 2 panels. In fact, it's obvious that most people didn't read the whole story. But they saw 1 or 2 panels and were so offended that they couldn't look into what they were getting bothered about before posting a lengthy Twitter thread, or making a YouTube response essay about how the Joker is the latest character to fall to the SJW agenda. And on the other side, you have people who also didn't read the comic or are deliberately ignoring the context so they can dunk on the anti-woke side. Like, look at all these insecure, cis-hetero men who can't handle a pregnant Joker. It's one of the stupidest aspects of the culture war that both sides now, the woke and the anti-woke, or whatever you choose to call them, will take any opportunity to quote-unquote own the other side even when they are wrong. I mean, for God's sake, if you're going to be publicly outraged about something, don't you want to at least know what you're talking about so that you don't come off as a complete dumbass? This is both sides pretending like they actually give a crap about any of this stuff, while really just using nerd culture as a mouthpiece to spew their political nonsense. If you're offended by this Joker story, you are a thin-skinned snowflake. If you really believe that Joker is pregnant in the story, you obviously didn't read the book. If you did read the comic and still think it's offensive, then you haven't read many comics, especially not Silver and Bronze Age comics, which I guess depends on what you consider the Silver and Bronze Ages. I'm talking roughly the 60s and 70s with a little wiggle room. There were really wacky, off-the-hook stories published by DC and Marvel in that time frame. Look at the Superman family during that era. There was a story where Superman wanted to marry Supergirl because he believed she was the only girl who could understand him. The only reason he didn't was because Krypton, which was long dead by this time, had laws against cousins marrying each other. There's a story where Supergirl was dating her pet horse Comet, who could turn into a man. There was a story where Lois Lane was turned into a black woman by a machine. And a story where the Punisher was turned black over at Marvel using plastic surgery. There was a story where Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, gave birth to her rapist, who then tricked her into loving him again. And let's not forget about the 90s, the era with the bondage queen Sue Storm. But you, being the precious little snowflake that you are offended because the Joker ate mud? I used to consider myself part of the quote-unquote anti-woke side, and I still hold to those beliefs, but now I consider myself on my own side because the two loosely established groups are equally ridiculous. Now, I did say that I would circle back to the main story. The main story, titled It's Not Funny Anymore, is the fourth of 7 chapters written by Matthew Rosenberg and drawn by Carmine Di Giandomenico. Sorry if I butchered that last name. The art's pretty good, especially compared to the art from the backup. The story is hit or miss. It starts with a guy who is shot in the head by the Joker, but then it turns out that this guy is also the Joker, or a doppelganger, and he survived the headshot. The story is told from the perspective of the shot in the head Joker, who believes he's the real one. Though he meets Harley Quinn, who thinks he's fake, the Red Hood meets him and is unsure, and of course you have the other quote-unquote real Joker out there who also thinks that he's the real one. This story isn't breaking any new ground. It's not the first time we've gotten a story with multiple Jokers, and it won't be the last. Throughout the story, there is a running monologue. Some of it's telling the audience about the importance of subverting expectations, which is a modern writer's go-to excuse when they get backlash on their project. There's also a statement about how there is no such thing as a good cop, which makes it hard to tell if that's the Joker saying this stuff or if it's Matthew Rosenberg lecturing the audience. I'm going to assume the latter. But the reason that I bring up the main story is that I have seen comments here or there from people who actually did read the story. Some readers have the theory that this backup feature with the mud creature that turned into a miniature Joker may explain why 2 Jokers are running around in the main story, implying that the villain Clayface is either part of the Joker's schemes or maybe even working undercover for Batman. It would explain how he survived the gunshot. Though at the same time, even though I wouldn't necessarily call the Joker a superhuman, I also don't doubt that he could survive a gunshot to the head. Here's the part where I give my opinion on the backup story. I think it sucked. Plain and simple. The art was mediocre, not that it's much different from the art that you see in Marvel and DC these days. Francisco Francavilla could easily be an artist from overseas that DC hired because he's cheaper than someone in the US, which is becoming an all too common practice at both companies. The fact that they employ foreign artists doesn't bother me. What bothers me is that when they hire artists with low talent that drive down the value of comics. And I don't just mean the monetary value. The story itself is ridiculous. I don't find it offensive, just weird. But like I said, it resembles the shenanigans from the Silver Age, which is the same tone that the other backup features have followed. The first one saw the Joker flirting with Supergirl and her turning him down. The second one had the Joker fake his death to see which villains would care about him. And in the third backup, the Joker was hit by a train. He tried to go to the hospital but was denied care, so he went to Mr. Pig, who proceeded to fuse him with Jackanapes and Gaggy the Clown. So this story isn't that weird compared to the others. But again, I suspect people didn't read beyond a couple panels. As I mentioned before, this story would be more fitting if it was part of the Silver Age. There is evidence other than the plot that lends itself to that idea, such as the old school looking Joker logo or the references to older comics that don't exist, so don't bother looking them up. But those references reflect Matthew Rosenberg's attempt to bring back a practice that hasn't been given much fanfare in recent decades, which is making references to milestone issues and first appearances. What makes this a poor rendition of a Silver Age story is the contempt and sense of irony that Matthew Rosenberg seems to put into his comics. And that may not be the entirely accurate, but that's the best way I can describe what I feel from reading his comics. And that attitude that he's putting into his work doesn't really work out for a Silver Age type story. Silver Age stories were often zany and weird, but they were sincere. Sincerity, among other things, is lacking in modern day comics. The palpable sense of resentment that modern writers seem to harbor towards upholding character legacies, maintaining continuity, and crafting stories that fans actually want to read is only growing as fans become more discontent and disconnected from modern comic fare. This story isn't an example of the woke infecting DC. It's just another example of a writer failing to captivate the audience but succeeding in pissing people off. Which, who knows? That might have been Rosenberg's intent from the get-go. So, if you didn't bother to read the whopping 7 pages of this backup story, then congratulations. You probably just spent a week of your life being outraged and offended over a line of dialogue by a midget named Gaggy. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. I'll see you all next time. Bye.